Hello, my name is Simon Rickman and I'm a leadership and development coach. What I would like to do is to give you a taster of my 7 habits for highly effective home working. This was a series of webinars that I put together during lockdown because I wanted my clients to think about how they could respond to this situation more positively. And we talked about the opportunity to think about how we could cope in these unprecedented times. And one of our drivers was to think about how can we deal with the stress that this is causing and become more resilient. And indeed, as we were coming out of lockdown, we were finding that a number of people were saying, well, actually, I like working from home. I think I can be as productive as I was when I was in the office. So indeed, the question is very much out there, is working from home here to stay? And indeed, the early research that we saw, which has continued since then, was indicating that workers wanted to continue to work from home in some sort of way. And what they were also demonstrating was that they were also as productive as they would have been if they had been in the office at that time. So it was very interesting research to receive. So I set out by splitting the 7 habits into 3 separate blocks. As an example, the first series that I showed was showing an overview of the habits and then looking at habits 1 and 2 in particular. And what was really important to me was to get people to think about not just the 7 habits on their own, but how you could practically apply them and take action in your own specific environment, in your own specific situation. And my driver for that was to help us feel a little bit better. Clearly, the situation that we were finding ourselves in was extraordinary, but we realized that if we worked together, we would be stronger as a result. And the idea was to create some sort of new normality, another word that was used very frequently. And whether people were moving from the office to home, or they were on furlough, or indeed they were trying homeschooling for the first time. And then we saw people going back to the office. Our normality was shifting at a hectic rate, and that was causing a lot of stress for people. So in this particular taster, let me give you an idea of what I cover in habits 1 and 2. First of all, it was to understand what habits actually meant and to recognize that there were certain habits that we've inherited or that we have been conditioned by over many, many, many years. So that nature-nurture discussion. And that once we understood what habits meant and what habits we have, we could take responsibility for them. So habit number 1 is being proactive, which means taking responsibility of everything that happens to you. And specifically, we focused on the circle of influence, what you can do, and the circle of concern, things that you are concerned about, but you can't do anything about. Then we looked at habit number 2, which is beginning with the end in mind. And there we started to question, well, why do I do what I do? What are my values? And what am I driving towards? What are my goals? And we looked at the impact of change, particularly sudden change, on why we were experiencing the feelings, the thoughts, perhaps the negativity, and how to come through that in a more positive way. And the other thing I introduced my clients to was something called the VUCA world, which was something that was happening around us. So the volatile, unpredictable, very complex and ambiguous world, which in addition to what was happening with coronavirus, would help to explain why we were feeling this sense of uncertainty. And then at the end of the day, what was most important is not just talking about these things, but ensuring that my clients took action. Because if they didn't take any action, then nothing is going to change. These are the takeaways that I gave them after the first session. And the idea was to make the habits a habit. So it was to have an agile and flexible approach. We need to have some sort of structure, but we need to understand what are we moving towards. We needed to create that because our normal structure had been taken away. That normality was different to everybody. So if we had some sort of routine and some sort of purpose every day, that would help us to get through this pandemic in a more positive way. But we should take responsibility for our choices. I've mentioned living in that circle of influence and circle of concern. So choose to live in the circle of influence. That we need to have clear communication channels. If we're working from home, we need to keep in contact with people in the office. So how do we do that? Through regular check-ins, one-to-ones, group meetings, using social media, using the new videos that were popping up all over the place. And be prepared to say, you know what, because this is unprecedented, we don't know the answer. And that's okay, but then we need to go and find out and have that strength to say, we don't know, but we will find out and work together. And finally, to challenge people and say, do you know what your organization's values are? Because if you do, you can then live them. This is where they really come into play. And if you don't, then I would challenge the leaders of those organizations to say, you need to have some values in your organization. So thank you very much for listening. Continue to stay safe as we go into this next phase, phase 2. And I look forward to hearing from you soon.